I'm gonna do unto you what you did unto me.
You did what you want.
Payback.
I don't know where yours is. Someone probably seen a value in that and ran off with it.
Put it on eBay.
I think so. Okay, here we go.
Missing Sue today.
I haven't heard back from her, so I don't know.
Welcome and thank you for choosing freeconferencecall.com. You are helping people around the world communicate for free. Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Victor, have you ever gone to that little farmer's booth down there at Calcasas on 75?
No.
You are the
Right on
host.
the corner.
Is it good?
Star
If you
now.
want good stuff,
Otherwise,
go there.
please enter your PIN
We
followed by the
just bought
pound or
about
hash.
$60 worth of stuff.
Oh my gosh. Might have to do that.
Thank you. There is one other participant
tomatoes?
in the conference.
I bought a bushel of
Please announce
seconds
yourself.
for Elmer to make salts out of. They're about yay big around, just gorgeous.
Hello, Cece.
Just small. What's your first name, Sue?
Come on in.
Dan. Dan.
Dan.
Like Dan with a big.
Okay.
You're thinking Sue Stewart.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a representative that's not here today.
Okay,
So get
I'll remember that, Dan.
Mark, do you know what we have on the phone?
No. Sue, is that you on the phone?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Hello? Mark.
Yep, hello. I am on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, loud and clear.
My mask, my glasses fogged up.
Andy, who
Mike,
are you looking for, Andy?
This is Mulder's tag, but I guess it's.
Probably in the DDA or no?
The ZPA?
DDA.
Oh.
Yeah, she's on both boards. Yeah.
Well, I see it's noon, so I guess we'll call the meeting to order. And Mr. Cups, I guess you're a new member, so welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I'll do roll call. John Cups,
Yes.
Dana Mulder,
yes.
Mark Gilbert,
Here.
Sue Irish Stewart,
Here.
and Cece Johnston. Looks like we have a quorum.
Very good. First item on our agenda is approval of minutes of the July 17 meeting. Any corrections or additions? Are your motion to accept them?
Make a motion to accept that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You want a roll call on that, or?
We'll just get Sue to confirm aye.
Sue?
Aye.
Yep,
Okay,
okay.
very good. All right.
So I think motion carries. Yep.
All right. Motion carried. Any board communications? Okay, do we have anyone from the public who would like to make a comment?
And something that's not on the agenda.
Oh, something that's not on the agenda.
Yeah, this is our first time having official chair, so.
All right.
my-
I need my handheld here.
No, it's all right.
Very good. Well, we'll do old business then, and the first item is the Bluff vegetation management summary.
Yeah, so very quickly here, I want to get on the screen a little bit bigger for you guys to see. So at the last tree board meeting, we discussed the tree board's ideas and goals for the bluff. And I remember the tree board saying that it would be ideal to have a bluff management policy for the publicly owned bluff property that wasn't dictated by individual requests. When we presented to council, we included some legal research that we discovered in which we determined that the city does not own the portion of the bluff between Ann Street and Church Street. We believe that the property owners are those that are in the original 1881 plat shown on the screen above. So we believe all those owners have a common right and interest into maintaining that bluff park, and that the city does not have the right to control or trim trees. Based on that idea that this is being the most controversial part of the bluff, the majority of the council decided to vote to lift the moratorium on trimming and cutting trees on the city-owned bluff property, and not go ahead with a bluff vegetation management plan at this time, and to continue with the policy that we have in place. Most of that conversation was dictated by the fact that most of the complaints we get, or most of the discord that we get between above the bluff and below the bluff people, are related to this Ann Street and Church Street section. So at this time, right now, the city is waiting to hear back from people below the bluff to see if they're forming a property owners association. But right now, we're not in the business of controlling or managing tree trimming or cutting on this portion of the bluff. So that's really what happened. So there's still a lot to be determined, but that's where we're at. So
So we don't have any sense of whether the people down below will be entertaining requests to remove trees, or
not at this point. We
don't really know anything at all.
all we have is a couple contacts from people below the bluff trying to organize all these people in this plat that you see on the screen to try to form some sort of organization. I don't know what stages they're at that. We've handed them all the addresses and information for them to make that decision.
What do you think about the city putting forth an offer to manage it for this group?
I would have to run that by council. I think first they need to come, I mean, it's their property. They need to make a decision on what they want to do with it.
I just wonder if they even know what the options might be.
Well, they should. We send a letter to them saying that they have, we sent a letter to them, and I've talked with several different individual owners. Basically, what we need for them, and even for us to approach them to say we would like to see if we could manage it, is we need them to form an association, because we can't deal with just one property owner on 4th Street. So we need them to have a representative of their association before we can even begin that. And then council will decide if that's something they want to do. So that's.
I feel like we're still left with the issue of the greater good for the community, and, you know, watershed issues, hydrology issues, failure of 119 if it washes out. I mean,
I sent an email to the state letting them know about that issue. So they're going to respond about that. So these issues are still at large, but I guess the remaining question is it between the private residents private owners to determine how to fix that issue, or is it the city want to step in? Do we step in with other private properties on like, for example, East Bluff that we don't own? I mean, so that's a question that council would have to ultimately.
Who's paying the taxes on that property?
Right now, there's been since the city assumed that we owned it, no taxes have been paid.
Well, if the city doesn't own it, somebody should.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're working with the county. They're creating a legal description for the property. And then we're going to figure out going forward from there, how to assign a value to that and how that value is distributed to the residents in the plat. And ideally, it would be once they form an association, just like you do with other associations, here's the bill for that tax value on that, for that parcel. So.
just thinking ahead, nothing to do about it right now, but I just wonder if at some point they might like some help, you know, from the tree board, or I don't know, whether it's the city as a whole or the tree board helps with coming up with ideas. Or I
did, in my letter to them, I did offer that we're here to assist in certain ways. Obviously, we can't do the formation of the association for them, to act as a mediator, moderator, city to provide any materials that we have, any research that we've done in the past, any kind of help. I think right now the ball is in their court to form an association and then to reach out to us at that point. So I mean, they know, I think we have had a couple of calls from different owners about what this letter means. So we are getting, people are receiving that letter. And so I think we're just waiting right now. I've talked to people below the bluff and above the bluff on what's the next steps are. And it's just, I can't force them to,
Right.
but I do, there is someone who is organizing things. I just don't know how long it's going to take them. So.
Any other comments from board members on this subject? Anybody in the audience have a comment?
All right.
You're all set on that?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any new developments, I'll bring them to the tree board, of course. But this is where we're
Sue,
at.
I just want to check in. Can you hear everybody?
I can hear Victor when he's using his presentation voice,
Okay.
but sometimes I miss comments in between, but I think that probably doesn't matter.
I'll do a better job, Sue.
Okay.
All right. Our next item is the M19 Zoll Street landscape presentation.
Yep, so as you all know, we are doing some landscaping for here on 119 and Zoll Street. Tim Knutson of Beckett and Rader is going to present on some conceptual landscaping plans that he presented to council, just really briefly on what the landscaping is going to look like. I think from the tree board's perspective, we really want to get an idea of the tree species, location, and spacing that might be beneficial. So let's gear our conversation toward that. Yeah. So Tim, if you want to take it away, I'll get the first. Let me just zoom out a little now.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim
I got a-
from Beckett and Rader.
Laser pointer if you need.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
One is red, one is blue. If you just, yeah.
So we were asked to do a landscape site concept plan or concept plans for the corner of Zoll Street and Main Street. To enhance this corner as an entrance to downtown, to maybe blend the spillway and walkway ramp with the site. Right now, it just kind of appears as a stark new concrete form in the middle of lawn. And to maybe create some unusable, functional, comfortable space here. But really the emphasis was, I guess to formalize this corner as the entrance to downtown and Zoll Street as the direction to take for, to get to City Hall and to the beach. So we prepared two concepts. I'm going to show you both of those. Do we want to talk about?
No, the dog. We don't need to talk about the dog. It's just in here.
So we looked at two concepts here, and they both have a lot of similarities, but they have one big difference. This first concept, so this is Zoll Street, Main Street to our north, City Hall will be down here, and this is the existing non-motorized ramp and spillway. And so this concept, we're showing landscaping primarily on this side of the walkway to do a number of things. Number one, when you're driving into town, this form catches your eye a little bit, the form of the concrete walkway, just a little bit. We think we can probably build on and enhance that form such that we're directing views down Zoll Street and more to City Hall and just kind of letting those views promulgate across this whole area. The other thing this does is it creates a separate space here and gives us some buffer from the road. So we've got some separation so that people in this space and using the ramp don't feel like they're right next to a roadway anymore. One thing we did do in the variation of this version is extend the trees further, I guess, embellish that feeling of enclosure. We kind of want to figure out whether we want to do that or not. Probably the other difference between this plan and the next plan I'll show you is the presence of a decorative wall. We're thinking of a low wall, a knee wall, maybe about this height, but something substantial such that we could post some simple text on it, whether it's City of Harbor Springs or Harbor Springs or something like that to give you, kind of a formalized entry into town. There are a couple challenges associated with that. The grade drops down from the curve to here. We know most people come into town from the east, and we also have road rights of way that we have to stay out of with any construction like a wall like this. So the best that we can, we're trying to carry this curve this way so that any text that is seen on this face coming in from the east direction on Main Street gets your attention. And so maybe as you're passing the intersection, you see the rest of the text on this wall. But again, the purpose of that wall is just to provide a low wall. One, to give us even more separation between pedestrians and the intersection, but really to kind of formalize the entrance to downtown. So underneath the shade trees, to kind of further create that enclosure, we're proposing a series of small flowering shrubs against the ramp, and then some larger pockets of flowering shrubs, primarily around this wall, just to add some interest, fronted with some colorful perennial beds here, and on this side, in between beds of flowering shrubs. So we're really we're doing two things. We're kind of creating a corridor landscape for this trail, but we're also creating a separate space and a landscape to suit it for this space. Let's see, any other details I need to make sure I mention are, so number one, we're proposing relocating the City Hall sign here. We know it's south of the driveway right out here right now. And it kind of, one gets lost as, you enter the space as a driver, but it also kind of gets, lost in the composition with the really nice sculpture that's out there also. So we'd like to pull that sign, or are proposing to pull that sign out from the face of the building to just north of the driveway, accenting it with some ornamental grasses and perennials. Lastly, showing pedestrian bollard lights on this side. These could be something as simple as a knee-high bollard that's, even a low voltage fixture or something powered with solar light. Any
Next.
questions on this version before we move to the next? Yes.
I guess this isn't a tree question, so I'll make it brief, but, so is the wall then sort of retaining with flowers on the backside, sign on the front?
Yes.
So I wonder if you always see people stop there and resting or getting oriented or whatever, if we would make that more of like a freestanding seat wall type thing, where, we could have some wayfinding, where we go from here, a place to rest and hydrate,
Yeah.
just a thought.
Yeah, and I think we should talk about that a little bit. We talked about the notion that people tend to gather coming through here, mainly at this corner, and how we could, enlarge space to accommodate those. The ramp from the top to here is flanked with these two walls, and we're kind of bound by those two walls. We can't perforate them to create, a patio that matches this level. We even asked if we could perforate it to create some seating spaces along the ramp, and the answer was no. However, once we get beyond that wall, we've got all sorts of space down here to expand pavement and give people, more space to linger. We know there's a drinking fountain here and a bench, which are already attractants for that kind of activity. So maybe we need to think about expanding that even more and creating an area for people to get out of the path of travel and linger, and then maybe incorporate some wayfinding with the City Hall side. I know that's something that came up in the last conversation too, was the notion of getting some expanded paved area for people to stop and linger and get their orientation straight.
And maybe some shade.
And some shade too, yeah. Good point.
Just one more question. So those are ornamental trees, Was there any thought given to doing shade trees?
Yeah, so these are actually, I'm probably hedging, but I'm calling them large flowering or small
Oh, I see.
ornamental.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong thing. Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, large ornamental or small canopy trees. So, I wouldn't necessarily want to propose something like a sugar maple here, but I could see, like an autumn blaze or, another variety that maintains a, kind of a balance between the 15-foot size of a flowering tree and a really large size of a shade tree.
What are the trees just up above that on the bluff coming down? There's 4 or 5 beautiful trees up there.
Existing now?
They got gorgeous canopies on.
Yeah,
I think those are crab apples across the street,
on the same side of the street?
on the north side of
Yeah, if you're-
119.
You got to go further up.
Yeah, I think the ones on this side of the street,
They're on the south side, right up above the,
yeah.
They're further east of the spillway. I think they're just east of this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what those are. I didn't think
I think they're flowering.
they may be crab apple.
Well,
I
so
don't think
Ben, you know?
One full-size apple tree.
Yeah, I think they're apple flowering crab apple.
those are beautiful. They got a great canopy on.
I have another question. Well, and then we want to be careful about whatever trees go in, that they're not dropping litter. And so this says walkway, is this intended to be a bike and a walkway, or?
It's intended to be the bike path. I mean, but you can walk and bike on the bike path.
Yeah, I think, and I'm presuming here, but I'm presuming the intent is a non-motorized.
Non-motorized trails.
To
Yeah.
satisfy, bike and pedestrian use at the same time.
Move on to the next one.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, these were the pictures first, I guess.
Yeah, actually, let's look at these while we're here. So this is what I was talking about regarding the form of that ramp as you come to town. Now, this is a little exaggerated because most of the time you're going to be looking straight forward to drive safely. But, your eye does pick up this form. And yet your eye goes past that form to this development and the building here. And so our thought is by, placing some small canopy trees along this curvature and accenting that curve, we sort of balance this view and make it maybe go away a little bit. But we also enhance this curve, which gets your eye moving, in this direction.
Then, does that red pointer not work? If you want, you do. No, the other button.
Oh, shoot, okay.
There you go. Yeah. You don't have to use it if you don't want.
No, it's much easier. So this is the view going eastbound out of town. And again, your eye kind of picks up this form, in the lawn, but also all these vertical elements. And it's a great stadium and a great setting back here, but from the corner, there are a lot of really visually distracting elements that kind of make your eye bounce around. If we plant this side of the ramp with a row of canopy trees, we can make most of that go away. The other thing a row of trees does, lastly, is anytime we place a vertical surface closer to the road, traffic speeds will go down. We know that it's shown in studies. A lot of it depends on how close you can get to the road and what the design speeds are, but we know it'll have that effect. And I'm a local and I've lived here for a number of years, and I always noticed people really some people tend to stand on it once they get past that intersection. So we think it also served to maybe control speeds a little bit. So we did a couple quick sketches or elevations to kind of communicate what we were talking about regarding view buffering and directing our views. So this is that first option of putting the shade trees on this side of the ramp. And you can see what it does. It kind of controls the views. It is architecture. It advances the little sweep that this ramp takes. And this would be the low seat wall. And so your eye even starts to pick up on the edge of that as you come down the road. I think the next illustration shows, the opposite. So going eastbound out of town. Again, the views are really significantly buffered. Depending on our choice of tree, we could buffer it even more. If we've got, canopy to canopy coverage, make that almost go away completely, at least when the leaves are out. Again, it makes the roadway feel much narrower, and the form of this seam wall would be really prominent coming from this direction.
I think this is really nice.
Looks really good, but are we gonna be sued from the homeowners across the street for blocking their view of the lake?
Oh, we'll have to work with a tree species that stays
Less than 100 feet tall.
within their view shed, yeah. Yeah. So again, kind of another reason to consider a medium-sized canopy.
I think that's all we have for the,
Go back to maybe the very first slide. And if we don't have it, I can explain the difference. Well, let's go back to
the original.
the concept of that. So the biggest difference between this concept and the other concept that we did is this orientation was the first. So we were allowing views through the ramp to this point, and then using shade trees to buffer and control views on this side of the ramp. The other difference is that this wall was not present. Knowing from when we presented this to council, the prospect of this wall was received pretty favorably, and we were encouraged to explore it more. We've got topography from benchmarks so that we can kind of put some more detail on this and figure out how visible it really will be if we propose it there. I think likewise, the collective response we got regarding the placement of landscape on this side versus this side is that this side was much preferred because it makes this feel like a separate space, and it also buffers users for the walkway, from the adjacent roadway. So if you can kind of imagine a plan without this wall and with the bulk of the landscape flipped on this side with just low shrubs and perennials on this side, I think that's probably a pretty good depiction of the other options. I'm sure, as a tree board, you're thinking about this already, but placing trees at a little bit of a risk right against the roadside there. Again, we know speeds tend to climb as we go out of town, so we really want to try to pick something that is going to be hardy and substantial in terms of, salt spray and exposure and winter temperatures and, generally urban conditions. We think we could do so. We just need to pay attention to what we pick.
Are we thinking all the same trees then, just to kind of create that sense of movement as opposed to mixing it up?
As a designer, that would be my recommendation. Strongest sightline we'll get is if we use all the same species, but I understand the need or the desire to have some diversity. So I guess if that were the option, I would propose we work in maybe groups of 3, maybe 3 by 3, and have 3 different species. But you're right, ideally we would want to do them in all the same species.
Are we thinking then that garden club maintains or?
I don't think we're that far yet. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think our next step is for me to develop this concept a little more,
Mhm.
and especially regarding this wall here. Again, to try to flesh that out, what the elevation would look like based on the grades around it. And then also to come up with some recommendations for plant species for what we're proposing that'll take the conditions. Is that help, right?
The number of trees you're planning on, are the 7 shown there, or you talked about extending it up some possibly as well?
Yeah, so we should probably talk about that. The main reason we extended the tree line is because we were exploring the prospect of a dog park.
Yep.
Further back this way. And the first thought was, if we put a dog park at the entrance of town, we better make sure we control views into it. So I want to say we had 9 trees total.
So, yeah.
No, actually, we've got more. we would have 10 total. There's 2 inside this planter and then 8 beyond. I'm not sure that anything beyond this is necessary, unless you really try. Once you're down into the street this far, you're looking at the intersection to be safe. When you're back here a little further, these existing trees, pretty nice trees here, cover your view into the site as it is. So, I guess one thing we can do for the next meeting, the next council meeting, is get some photos from further up the hill and try to demonstrate what it would look like with just this many trees planted versus those last 3, to see if we're really gaining any benefit from those last 3. I'm suspecting probably not, but I think it's worth, a quick sketch.
And I think what we want to talk here about is, tree species recommendations. And I should have combined the 2 items together with E3, but we did get that request for $12,000 donation. Someone would like to donate trees to be located here. Does it have to necessarily be part of these trees that are there? The individual requested that those trees be planted near or in front of City Hall. But they're offering $12,000, and I believe the species type, if I remember, was a Japanese oak. Ben,
Well,
is that what?
so,
That's what his email said, but I don't know if we've got in contact with him since to clarify if he meant Japanese oak or.
Never heard of the Japanese oak.
Japanese oak is a zone 7, 8.
7, 8, I was looking at that last night, yes.
So it wouldn't survive. I would be concerned with the Japanese maple unless we're gonna put a lot of effort into it. If it's standing up by itself, it would be problematic because it's slightly out of zone and fragile. And actually, one question I would push back for the previous project is there an estimated maintenance cost for some of the plantings that you guys are suggesting?
we haven't got to that point yet, but yeah, it's something like that.
And I guess the reason I'd say that to the tree board is that if they're gonna do this wonderful design with lots of nice plants, we should just try to take care of them so that, it doesn't get thrown in somebody's lap and then get lost.
Yeah, and there'll be a significant amount of added maintenance, particularly if you announce, introduce perennial beds and, some nice shrub beds.
So any suggestions, I guess, on tree species? I mean, how large of a tree do we want, first off, and how full do we want it to be? I mean, do we want that, what Tim was saying, like canopy to canopy, so there's blocks everything, or do we want something different? And do we want them to be all uniform, or do we want different species?
I think spacing's nice.
Should be different species, so when one dies out, it ain't gonna die, all of them ain't gonna die at the same time.
So we could pick similar forms, like hornbeam, linden, Japanese tree lilac, for example, would be similar in scale anyway.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, personally, I feel that all the larger trees should be all the same species. I just think that the look, overall look would be more inviting.
Well, I agree, but we just have so many discussions about diversity and all that, and maybe this isn't the place to focus on that so much.
And I think that question about diversity, I know, Ben, if I talked, it's okay if we have isolated parts of the town where there's some similar trees. It's more of if we look at the town as a whole, that we have a variety of species.
I would be comfortable with similar species if they're not a species that we have a lot of. I mean, so if we were in the softer maples, I would be concerned, especially if Asian longhorn beetle shows up in Michigan. It's already in the United States. That would be bad because we're already maple heavy. But and lindens would be in that list. And we have a lot of lindens also. I know we have planted 4 Japanese tree lilacs and city plantings, and I don't think any of them survived either because of maintenance or other issues.
I just put in a hornbeam in my house this year that I
Which-
just love. The form is beautiful, it's just a straight American hornbeam,
So
Yes.
Carpinus,
Carpinus, Americana.
that would be tough all by itself without shade because it's an understory tree. I mean, it's grown as a nursery plant, but it prefers to be, shaded by other things. I mean, its cousin is pretty successful in the Australians, but, hot hornbeam. There is one planted, there's several planted by the school, and there's some up by the skate park, and they're having some, the tops are dying out. I don't know if that's an installation issue or not. But we don't have a lot of concerns with diversity.
Yes, Sue?
Ben, I can't
I'm
hear you very well, Ben.
can I take my mask off?
You can maybe stand up and get
I
closer.
can scream. So I'm just thinking out loud, Sue, about what Dan had said, and I think that there's some potential, but we're a little heavy on lindens.
So what do you think about, some of the newer elm hybrids? And I'm deferring to the rest of you, but we're starting to use Accolade, Pioneer, and some of the other ones, just because we kind of feel the same way as Ben does. We've got a lot of the same things, and if we ever have something happen, particularly the maples, we're going to be in big trouble. We haven't had enough plantings of Accolade elm or Pioneer to really be able to make an assessment. They want it in the ground a year or so.
Bayview Association has maybe 20 accolades.
Okay.
And so they have, I think their consistent problem has been crotch failures. There's a lot of included bark because it's a Siberian elm hybrid. There is a Princeton elm down on Main Street, which is an American elm. And that's done fairly well, even though people have attempted to prune it several times poorly. And so and that's one we can either get locally or we can get shipped up. There was discussion about putting more Princetons down on Main Street, but that may not meet the form that the manufacturer wants to follow. So that'd be a good place. I mean, an American elm can be very big. Is the design intent, Tim, to try to shield some of that?
It is, so
Would an elm not fit that well though? Or?
that's what I'm wondering, if we're kind of looking at a larger flowering tree and a very small shade tree versus a big tree like a true American elm. I know Pioneer tends to be a little smaller, but if it's not doing well, then I don't think this is the place to.
Well, I think that it would just be a preventive maintenance issue. I mean, like just keeping an eye on them when they're small would probably work well. And I would think that they seem to be bushier than the American elm.
Yeah.
Um,
I start to think about larger flowering trees, and besides something like pear, which is, again, pretty abundant in the area, I struggle to think of something that's going to take.
Firewood magnets.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of firewood this year, so I'm kind of hesitant that way.
What about black gum? Do you think that's going to be more of an understory too?
It is so far north for black gums. Sweet gums struggle in Traverse City.
Sweet gums, no, definitely not.
And
How about like a skyline locust or something like that?
we have a lot of locusts. They tolerate the site. They're real slow. They're pretty open.
It might not give a strong buffer. I mean,
And I was gonna say, I think we would see through them. I think it would be interesting is if you had like a white birch grove, but it might be a big maintenance issue.
That's, yeah, that'd be pretty neat if you did something like birch, if it was doable.
If there were like a Renaissance paper, a paper I would feel more comfortable with than the European or the Japanese birches, just because they're actually a little bit more resistant to borers, but we would want to plan for leaf line or borer control if that was an option.
No oaks.
It's too far north for something like Mahola or ginkgo.
Ginkgos grow, but they are slow.
Slow.
I mean, I think that there's a really big one on Otis Lane that's been there for, It's the original Otis House planting, so Otis Elevator, I think it was planted 100 years ago, and it's 40 feet tall.
Well,
So, I
maybe,
mean, it would fit the staying out of people's view, but
Yeah.
it would not get big quickly.
my recommendation would be maybe we get from the tree board 2 or 3 species that we want to try to see if we can see if we could maybe fit those into that, and then maybe come back for a later discussion once we get these plans. But let's focus on a few trees, and we don't have to pick one today, but maybe just have a few recommendations.
May I also make another comment about the wall?
Mhm.
Because, I mean, the cost for the wall is $30,000. I don't feel, this is just my opinion, I don't feel we need a wall with the city of Harbor Springs on it. As we come into town, we also already have a sign that tells you it's Harbor Springs. I mean, I think the money that goes into the wall could be better used for something else than this.
I think that's a good council discussion as well.
Yeah, I think the input you want from us are basically on trees.
Yeah.
The tree species.
I'd like to nominate Linden, even if we do have a number of them. They're just a really nice form for that type of application, I think.
We did plant some sequoias that have been doing pretty well, I think, at planting 2 years ago.
I haven't looked at them. I mean, it would be a good thing to look at, collect data. There's a hackberry, which is not really, I mean, it's kind of nondescript, but it's surviving next to the American elm done by the Roman Catholic Church. But they can get big.
So linden, Sokovia, how about the Princeton elm? Is that something that we want to explore?
Sounds like it might be pretty large.
Yeah, I
That's what
mean,
I think.
it's potentially, I mean, lindens too, it will do it in about the same amount of time. But it's got a vase shaped structure. Once the canopy closes, the lower limbs will lose. And so looks like somebody's staying there like this, so we kind of lose I think the structure intent that Beckett Writer is looking for, so that might not be the best choice.
Yeah, if we went with a really large tree like that, we could probably,
You plant the carclinus underneath it though.
yeah, or we could change our plant palette underneath so that we have taller shrubs, to block some of the views into the site, but we may not block the taller elements like the light poles and things like that. So, I mean, I'd be happy between now and maybe 2 weeks from now to sit down and look at a plant palette, especially with regard to trees, and maybe the two of us can kind of correspond and
Nerd out.
whittle down, whittle down a list for you guys to consider. Does that make sense? Instead
Instead of sitting here and just.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right, thank you, Tim.
All right, that's as an item for our next meeting.
All right, we'll do that.
Okay, the next item is the potential tree donation.
Thanks. So yeah, I'll basically just talked about this. Our question going forward with the tree donation is, he did tie the $12,000 in with recommending a specific type of tree. I know I've been in contact with him. Ben, have you contacted him yet? Or you tried to?
I haven't gotten the name yet.
Okay, so what I'll do is let them know that, we definitely would appreciate the $12,000 donations. We just don't know if we can go with that specific type of tree for the reasons that the zone issues potentially.
It's just, I mean, it's like planting palms. It
Yep.
would be really cool for about 4 months and then it would die.
So but I think we would,
But
the
they're,
tree, if I speak for the tree board, we'd love to have the money, but
Right.
maybe get back to him on
The
this.
research I did last night on that tree, again, I don't see how it could possibly survive
Yeah.
up here,
Right.
that particular species. So,
So I'll get back to him, maybe work with him, seeing if he wants to work with different types of trees, and Ben, we three can talk and maybe see if we can find some solution there.
okay. Very nice gesture, I hope it comes to fruition.
Yes.
Next item is the Main Street tree donation progress report.
Yep, so very briefly, we've talked with Ron Fennick. I know Ben, maybe Ben, a few words, you've been talking with him a little bit more than I have lately about the trees.
So, I mean, the original suggestion was to use Princeton elms because we could get that effect of what a lot of people remember in our cities. He didn't seem to be, I don't think that was what he was envisioning the donation to be. He likes the form more of maple tree, but the concern is that the maples are we're maple heavy already. I made a suggestion of a swamp white oak. Those have been used a lot in the area and they seem to be doing well. I think that, this close to the lake would probably be all right too. Local inventories are low, so we can't find the number of trees that he's looking for from Lewis A. Hoffman Nurseries. We can find them from a couple other places. One of those being Christensen's Plant Center in southern Michigan. We'd be happy to ship to the city. If we do it all, then the next question becomes, I would like to delineate what the church is sensitive to know exactly what we're looking for, because there's some concern that the church had as to blocking the view of the church from Main Street by planting more trees, and I think if we can all work to be good neighbors, that would be easier to do on paper now than have to fight wills later. Absolutely. Is there a way we can facilitate maybe a meeting between the city and people at the church to see exactly what they're looking for?
Didn't Father appoint someone to be the spokesperson?
Bob Kalashevsky, and I talked to him on the phone the other day. Yeah, so
He would be the guy.
Yep.
Can we walk it and flag it, or virtually flag it?
Yep.
Just to see what their concerns would be.
I think that's fine.
Okay, well, good. Well, thank you for your work on that.
So the next step is,
We gotta thank Ron Fennick. I mean, he's doing a lot of this.
so we'll bring this back September 18th.
Okay.
We've talked about larger spacing between trees too.
Yep. That's,
So we wanna, I think we had discussed 30 feet between trees.
Yep.
Which still is a lot of trees. I mean, we can still pack 20 trees both sides of the street, 10 on each side. And I don't think Mr. Fennick had a problem with that either. I mean, he seemed to be none of that. He just wants to, if it could be like a uniform boulevard, I think is what he's in.
Chair, if I make one request going on, can we do F2 first, because F1 is 316, but we do have,
that's fine.
no, he's not here. It's
Absolutely, let's go right ahead.
yeah, let me get, all right,
May I
so,
approach the bench?
No, except for you.
yeah, there you are. So Paul Meridian, he lives on Glen Drive, and he's coming in for an application to plant 3 trees in the street, in the right of way, and he is proposing 3 different species. And I do have, he's provided a sketch. There are a couple spacing concerns that he just wanted to bring to your attention as well, but I have the sketch on the screen right now, and I'll let Paul take it away.
Thank you. Actually, I have a slight suggestion as a revision, if you wanted to kind of pass that along.
Okay.
Please. So I'll just take a second here.
John, take one and pass it down.
We lost a huge tree last month in that storm. One of the oldest trees on the street, probably 100-foot high, white pine. Anyway, so obviously that's a different type of tree, but it's actually my mother's home, and we are right next door to Ron Fennick. And the day the tree was down, we were out there talking. He's like, "Hey, I'd like to plant another maple here on the corner." And I said, "Well, that's funny, because we talked about planting some more trees along Glen Drive ourselves." And the 3 existing maples on the Washington Street side, I think about 15 years ago, we replaced those. They were old maples that had died off, that were probably 70, 80 years old. And anyways, at that time, the city actually planted trees, and we paid to upgrade them to a little bit larger size. So I wasn't sure how it worked now, and then of course I got a hold of Victor. It's a little bit different process, which is fine. So that's why we're here though. In the drawing that I just gave you, I kind of put pink marks there. There's some utilities that I didn't have on this sketch, so that's kind of rushing it to get to Victor, but we have our underground power right about here. We have underground gas that comes from this side of the street. And then we have our water main here that comes in. And so from a spacing, I'd like to actually move this tree down here and move this tree over a little bit so that the utilities are freer. That's where I drew in the pink marks. So it'd be like here and more like here. So that's a thought. Really prefer to do maples. And when I learned with the application that we can't do it, but I would actually petition today that we are allowed to do 3 maples. I've heard some interesting conversations here today, and it's a preference of your designer over here to have all one species. And we have a really nice row of maples coming down there, especially Ron has enhanced it a few years ago. Obviously, it happened right before this application process because they're all maples. I understand the need for diversity, I've heard that. But I also heard the comment, well, maybe this corner is one where we don't have to look at it that way. So, hey, we're at the scale of balance. We are proposing possibly to do an elm and an oak just to mix it up. I'd like to do one maple on the corner of Ron's lot and our lot, and then, but do whatever you guys are willing to allow, I guess.
Open up for discussion.
Does anybody want to talk for a second, talking too much?
Sue, you have any comments? No.
On the request that maples be put in on Glen Drive, because there are other maples there already and we're replacing maples, is that the question on the table?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't have strong feelings about it one way or another, except that we're trying to get away from maples. And almost any place in town where we lose maples, and try to put maples back in, then we end up with the same number of maples. But that said, I don't see these things in real rigid terms, so I'll defer to others.
May I make one comment on that? What we're proposing was never planted, and maybe she couldn't hear me. We had replanted maple trees 15 years ago on the Washington Street side where those had died off. But we've been there since 1975. There's never been a tree on the area that we're asking to plant. Okay, so we're trying, like there's.
So you're adding new trees.
We'd be adding new trees, correct?
3 new trees, one proposed is 1 oak, 1 elm, 1 maple. Paul said perhaps 3
Preference would be
maples.
3 maples.
What species?
I think those are blades, autumn blades or something like that. Whatever, they're the same as Ron has. Whatever Ron has in front of his house and what we have on the Washington Street side are the same species. I believe they're blades or something, autumn blades or something.
Personally, I would see a big problem with 3 maples. We can mix it up like on public projects, in parks and things like that. I don't know about autumn blaze, those of us in the industry, that's not one of our favorite. They tend to be kind of weak wooded. They tend to be prone to, fungal disease kind of thing, like sugar maple, red maple. Those are some of the ones that are native to this area.
And I could be
If you're open
speaking.
for discussion, yeah.
I'm not sure, but when I did meet with Charles Robinson Landscaping, I thought he said those are all autumn blades, but I don't know that for sure.
So that is a favorite
But it
with
would be the same
landscapers.
that's already there, I think.
That is a favorite with landscapers for sure.
Okay. Well, then that's most likely what they were
What do you,
suggesting.
what do you think, Ben?
I mean, we see with autumn blaze what we saw with Norway maples 20 years ago, which is that they're easy to propagate, and because they're easy to propagate, they're being purveyed all over the place. The problems that Dennis talking about are what we're just starting to see. They include bark fairly quickly, which means that they have a tendency to fail in storms, especially when they're big. It's a hybrid between a red and a silver maple, so the growth characteristic is huge. And this is a tree that can potentially be, a lot of sources will say that it's going to be 50 feet, but it's 50 feet in 20 years. Whereas a sugar maple might be 50 feet 50 years or 100. They are a primary food source for Asian longhorn deer. And so I think one of the things that we're saying with diversity is that it's okay to have different pockets that are all small monoculture, but if we're adding more maple trees so we're gonna increase the number of trees in the inventory, and so we're gonna drive up that number of maple, that I would, if Glen Drive becomes an autumn blaze hotspot, then what we should do as a management plan is to try to move away from, so the next person that wants to plant an autumn blaze maple should be told no. And I don't think that that's unreasonable to say that if we're gonna have more autumn blazes, then we need to limit them someplace else and let this be the place for autumn blazes. I think that's okay.
I mean, but would we be open to like, is it kind of a high water table there, I would imagine?
No.
Okay.
Well, and autumn blazes would tolerate water a little bit. I mean,
Yeah, I was thinking about like maybe a red maple for something different if we wanna.
well, and reds will tolerate, they're like so sugar maples are like a Goldilocks of trees. They like it just right. Red maples will tolerate really, really dry, like in oak savannas, and they'll tolerate it really, really wet, like in some of the swampy conditions that we get, like lowland hardwoods. So, straight red would be native and similar, but would also have some of the characteristics that, I mean, it would look similar. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good point of discussion. Is it the form that you guys like, or?
Yeah, so I was just gonna, thank you, Ben. It is, it's really kind of the shape and the size and matching what's there. But you guys, look, there's a couple alternatives here, and it's really pretty easy. We, again, probably 30 years ago or so, we planted some white pines here on our side. And there's this old juniper thing that was done when my family first was there in the early 70s. And what we've talked about since this tree came down and all this with my mom and my sisters, that look at, you know what, it doesn't matter what we can or can't do here. If we can't really kind of enhance that row, forget that. We can just plant on our side, remove this old stuff that's really overgrown and bad anyways, and kind of insert some deciduous and pines right through here. Big ones with a tree spade. So it doesn't really matter, you guys, whether we do this. We're gonna do something here regardless. If we do this, we're still doing this. If we don't do that, that's fine. And I'm not using that as an ultimatum, but really the thing is, it's in harmony with the neighborhood. And yeah, look at different areas and.
Didn't you say something about an oak and a?
Well, I just threw that out there for the application, but frankly, I think it looks awkward. There's, I agree with, is it Tim? Yes. His comment about if you have the same species on the curve coming in. I mean, clearly, when you look up and down like State Road, the diversity there, I think it looks, I understand the concept, but it does not it does not have a pleasing aesthetic value. And, every tree is going to be diseased. We've been through the elm disease. We've got the oak wilt or whatever downstate. I mean, it's bad down in Bloomfield Hills. I mean, it's all over. So what do we do? They're tough decisions. They're great ideas, but at the end of the day, it's what it is.
I'm all for you planting maple.
Thank you.
I would say yes, and especially if we could do something other than autumn brilliance, or autumn blaze, right? But
How about this? Give us the ability to fill in what's already there and the contiguous ornamental style or whatever that would be there. I bet, I bet in all of our lifetime, it'll be just fine. And if not, we'll be replacing them with something else, right? It's kind of the rule. We have a responsibility, so.
I think this is something we need to discuss perhaps at our next meeting, not your decision, but again, we've been talking about diversity ever since I've been on the board of trees. And again, when somebody's giving us a gift of trees, in our public projects, I really think we need to stick to diversity of trees.
Yes.
And I think that we need to keep that in mind, that that when we still need to keep diversity at our foremost, but when we have a special project where somebody's coming in perhaps to donate trees, that we can make exceptions.
So maybe we should just hold a vote to see if we want to allow 3 maples,
Alright.
a specific species, or just to go with what's existing.
Now, are they in the right of way down there?
They would be in the
Yes,
right of way.
they would be in the right way. That's what this is for.
Between the sidewalk and the curb, right?
Yeah, that's what it looks like, yeah.
And the utilities are overhead on the other side of the road.
That's correct. The overhead is on the other side, and then all of our laterals are underground.
And any vote you make, I'll have to reconfirm with Lucas to make sure this is okay, DPW, and then
That's fine.
sign an app. So
Okay, so it's
a motion.
Vote, Mr. Cups.
Maple's fine with me.
All right, Dana?
Okay with me?
Yes.
Sue?
Yeah.
And yes.
Okay. Motion carries.
All
All right, so
thank-
I'll get you your application. I'll talk with Lucas and I'll get that to you.
That sounds great, you guys. Thank you very much for your time today, and it's nice to be able to sit in here and share ideas. And you guys are doing a great job. I did not realize to the extent that the involvement is. So I compliment all of you on that.
Thank you.
Have a great
for
weekend.
Planting trees on the city right away.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you know what, it'll be beautiful.
I will go back to now
Thank you.
thank you, the application for 316 East Third Street. Just wants to replace a tree. I believe he's asking for a lilac. So we'll remove the current tree, which I don't know, he didn't state what it was, but to replace it with a lilac. And that's,
I think it's a flowering crab, isn't it?
Is that what he's replacing?
yeah,
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so. I drove by there last night. Of course, the house has totally been redone. That's 316, right?
yep, 316, yeah.
If that's the-
My only concern with the tree suggestion is the overhead power lines that are right there. I think the one he's suggesting reaches heights of 30, possibly 30 feet, between 20 and 30 feet. I don't know how that would interfere with the power lines.
They have to be trimmed at some point.
Have somebody come and out.
That's just something else for crew to go in and trim the top on it.
Well, we can if we want to. I mean, we have I think a normal 3-year guarantee survival. We can put stipulations on that they're responsible for any maintenance for X amount of years if they interfere with the power lines. But I mean, how far do we want to go with that? So
So the request is for,
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sue.
I was just gonna say, so the homeowner, I'm really having trouble hearing some people, but from what I gather, the request to put in a lilac is a concern because it looks as though that tree could get tall enough that it would be a problem with the power lines. And if that being the case, Mark was saying that, or someone was saying that we do require the homeowner to maintain the tree for a period of time, is that right?
yes,
Okay, and we do not allow topping trees, is that right?
I think that's correct, yes.
yes.
Well, I think you could keep it
Okay.
shaped though, right? I mean, if you didn't wait until the last
Right,
minute.
so we're,
Yeah,
as long as we're talking about trimming to shape and work around the power lines and not talking about, yes, you can put it in, but let's top it, then, yeah, I'm on the page. Thanks.
I guess my concern that is gonna be on city property, so after 3 years, does the city have the capability, I mean, of going around and trimming trees?
It's a good
Well,
question.
City planted a red maple up, or Crimson King, up on my place up there. And they cut the top out and it was dead 2 years later.
so actually this is a Japanese tree lilac, I think, right out here, isn't it, Ben?
Ultimately, we do have the ability to trim those trees. I mean, that's what our electric department does. So eventually, the burden will eventually fall on us, whether that guarantee is 3 years or 5 years. So,
Yeah, well, and my concern is
Yeah.
that it's done, hopefully it would be done properly so that we don't lose the tree.
and that's something that we've talked about here, potentially about having more training or lessons for our DPW staff and electric staff for trimming.
I guess my question was, I see lilac over and over again, but that's a genus, not a. So
think
we
it
were
was
talking about
Ivory
Syringa reticulata, we're talking about Japanese tree lilac, not vulgaris. which
Let me,
I think he was talking ivory silk with me. Did I-
It was an ivory, yeah, an
Yeah.
ivory
Okay.
silk.
That's
So
Japanese tree
reticulata.
lilac, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'd be okay, and maybe we just, if we grant it, we say that, with the understanding that the
Oh, yeah.
homeowner should keep it shaped, and that if needed, the city has the right to prune it to keep the lines clear.
I agree.
Ben, you were gonna say something.
I was just gonna illustrate, Mr. Cups' point earlier, which is that when we cut for power line clearance, usually it results in the death of the tree. But I don't think it's gonna be a plant that grows particularly fast where it is. So it's a very slow race.
Well,
Do-
so-
And I was gonna say, do we know if it's primary, or are we talking? Let's say we're looking at probably interference with phone and cable.
That's probably actually a phone that you're looking at
That's,
there.
yeah, that,
mhm.
Do you think?
I would say it's probably phone or cable.
I can get,
I was gonna say, I can run down there after the meeting as well, and see if it's.
So maybe-
It probably is.
That's on the north side, isn't it, Third Street?
South side,
It's the south side.
Well, it's the south side. That's where the power's at.
okay. So we're just seeing the lower line of the phone line.
Right.
I think we see two lines there. Or on the right side.
Yeah, that's, one's power and one's cable.
That's the Methodist church right
so maybe,
Phone are usually on the lower,
Yep.
and electric on the higher.
Right, yep.
So probably you've come into contact with the phone.
so if the tree board at least is okay with the species, then I'll just, again, run it by DPW and electric, Ben, just to make sure that before I sign the application, that go ahead.
Yeah. See, within the last year or so, we raised all those power lines down there
Yeah, we
on
did.
Third Street,
We did.
put new poles in.
All right.
Do we need to vote on this then?
No, I think this is fine.
Very good.
This one. Let's move on to,
The Arbor Fest Fall Conference.
yes. So really quickly, there is still an in-person Arbor Fest conference going on this year. It's down in Manistee. It's at the Orchard Beach State Park. And I figured that if there's any tree board members that want to go to that conference, the city is willing to pay for the registration and nice lodging there. The materials are included. It's on September 24th. Last I checked, it's 100 capacity, 87 slots are still available. I don't know how many
How
people,
it goes too.
yeah, I don't, the rate does change if you register after 9/14. If there is any interest, you guys, you can email me, get in contact me, and I'll reimburse you any fees that you want to, or figure out how to apply for it. But if there is, just contact me. So
Very
If
good.
it helps, we're members.
we are a member?
Uh,
Oh, you are,
Timberwolf
Timberwolf.
Tree Tales. I don't think they looked that closely.
Okay.
Do you go to this, Ben?
No, we usually go to the spring meeting, and sometimes we go if we're looking at like the International Tree Planting Championship or something.
There are some interesting topics, if you saw through the packet, that, might be of use to us. I mean, actually, we have Ben here as arborist, but just for,
Yeah, I think there was one on proper tree trimming.
yeah, tree pruning, yeah.
Workshop or something.
Yep.
Listed as one, so,
Right, so just it's out there in case you do want to go, get in touch with me.
very good, thank you. The last item on the agenda is one that I asked to be added, that, and we don't need to decide today. But I'd like to have a list of tree planting sites that when we get a gift of a tree, that we can expedite the effort to get it in the ground. I know I noticed in the paper 2 weeks ago that we had a tree donation.
Mhm.
And again, where are we gonna put that tree? So if we could just maybe think of some possibilities and have suggestions at our next meeting.
I think that's a great idea. I think as we get tree donations rolling in, it'd be nice to be like, hey, we got these 10 spots available for a tree to be planted, and then maybe we could give that to the donor to then pick, which spot.
Well, and in addition to, we also have that relief
Grant, yeah.
tree grant in which we're gonna be needing to plant trees as well.
Yep.
I know we talked about the Zoll Street there, but those are gonna be smaller than I think that you desire to have put in there, so. So again, if you could come perhaps, or even to expedite things even better, send a list either to me or to Victor, and then we'd have them available to discuss and decide.
I'm wondering if we should focus on public sites for donated trees.
That's what we have
Yeah.
been doing, yes, yeah, yeah, all public sites. So,
All right, well,
okay.
I had just
Any
one-
other comments?
I just had one thing to bring up. Do we have dead trees that need to be replaced?
Ben, do we have dead trees? I think we have did we pull the ones out at Zorn?
Yes, we did.
We did,
Both
right.
I didn't know
Zorn
where they're
and,
going.
But they're gone.
both Zorn and,
Ford,
we took one out at, Shea.
Shea, yeah.
Are we gonna replace them right now, or that'll go on the donated tree list, or?
Well, there was concerns about the water table level at some of them and whether we want to risk doing that again right now. I know you have the water tolerant species list, but maybe we can,
Well,
Put that-
we're also spraying the lawns there, and I'm finding that getting the records has been a little bit problematic, so.
yeah, that's right. yeah.
I would like to know better what they're being exposed to, because it could be an interaction with water, managing for turf and other things, like new installation, it would be, probably better to have all that together.
Does the city spray, or do we?
We contracted out.
No, yeah, and it's just that the contractor's busy, I mean, so, similar company that has not a lot of people in the office, so it's like phone taps.
And I know, I think Ben, you mentioned to me when we were talking about the trees coming out down there, it would have been nice if you would have been on site so that you could have examined the roots of the tree, and perhaps get an idea of what was going on there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to know, I mean, it's nice to have a body of necropsy, if we can take it apart at when it comes out, that's nice. The ones at Zorn Park, I mean, they were displaying, the reason I was concerned about what had been applied is because there was distortion to the leaves and the growth was incorrect. And so my concern was there was an interaction with something you had been exposed to. But that could be something like road salt. It could also be stuff that they came from the nursery with that is carrying over the ball. And I don't want to introduce a suggestion that the contractor did something improper, but it could be a combination between them doing what they're supposed to, not knowing what our irrigation habits are, and then having sensitive species, and those three things could lead to loss several times over if we continue that. So it would be, I think, important to. I would like to know more about the irrigation practices that we have too. I mean, I know we have it, but knowing our precipitation rate and our clocking is hard to find. And that's important. Water's not a panacea. If we can kill things with water just as well as we can with Roundup. So that would be something.
And I know that two of the lindens down there are not looking real good right now.
And that's, yeah, I mean, and lindens are usually really tolerant. It's hard to have them have problems.
For our next meeting, do you think it would be, we could dig up that information on sprinkling and what changes could be made and on what chemicals are being used, and is there anything else we could do?
I would like to audit the irrigation, so it's not just, frequently we have, irrigation goes in and it's clocked by rule of thumb. So, people will say, well, this size rotor should take this many minutes, but that's really dependent on how large the main is, how close together the heads are, what size nozzle the heads have. And then also how old the system is, because we usually have sand that's introduced in most of the stuff, and so that wears out plastic parts, and so, we may have orifices that get bigger if we haven't changed nozzles in a while. So actually, real-time measurements are really important to know. And then having the clock schedule. When does it run? How's it run?
What's
We have a
involved?
rain sensor. I don't think we have a rain sensor for any of the systems in the city, which is nice. And I'm gonna get up on a soapbox here, which is that every time I drive past the school and I see them watering in the middle of a rainstorm, I wonder why we're introducing fluorine and chlorine into the ground when we don't have to. It's a waste to save resources. I mean, for $100 part, we could save, 10 times the cost of that thing by not irrigating when we don't need to.
Ben, how much would like an audit be? And maybe we just focus like on the,
Single zones are easy. I mean, it might cost us $100 if we've got a single zone. I need to know how many different zones we're working with and stuff like that. So I need to know how many zones, how large of an area we're doing.
could you sit down though, if this is all right, sit down with Lucas and come up with a proposal and what the cost would be?
Yeah,
Because
that would
it
be
seems
fun.
silly to keep putting trees in that are destined for.
Well, you are talking to Lucas right now, so,
Yeah.
in the contract, so if you talk with Lucas about that, a couple $100 for an audit is, at least for these parks that we're talking about,
Just the parks.
Zorn
yeah,
and
to
Shea
start
Park,
with
yeah,
anyways.
yeah.
Let's start with one.
Yep.
And I think, with Shea, the one thing you run into is that there's a lot of legacy in the soil that we don't know. I mean, you hear a lot of stories of how it used to be there and stuff.
It could have a lot of cow's milk in it.
Yeah, well, and somebody had said tanning or something went on there at one point.
I think that was before Shepherd's bought it and put the dairy in there.
So, but, I mean, if there's things like lye, or, I mean, some of those things can be long-lived, they're brought to the surface, and sometimes they'll be more or less susceptible to that, so, let's
Yeah,
start with water and see
yeah,
what we're dealing
yeah.
with. One step at a time, I mean.
Can I just say one more thing about the two, about the Shea Park and then also Zorn Park? Is we seem to have gotten in this pattern of ring around the rosy trees around the outside. I'm sure it's just to keep things flexible for tents and car displays and all that. But I wonder if at a future meeting we could talk about, I think aesthetically it's nice to have clumps, maybe rather than onesie.
I think that's fine. I also
Can
think
I
though,
make a comment on that?
Sure, Sue,
Sure.
go ahead.
Dana, that's an interesting comment, and I was thinking about that recently because I saw that the Historical Society wants to consider putting the AHA, that old ship, in the middle of that park. And I was thinking, even though sometimes when I walk past that and I look at that ring around the park, I think, gosh, those trees are really in a ring around that park. As it turns out, that may be a good thing that we did it that way because the Historical Society wants to use the middle for a purpose. So,
well,
yeah.
that's a good point, Sue. I was just gonna bring up that I think depending on what we do with each of these spaces, each park might have a different plan with its, for its purpose and function, as well as where we plant the trees. So I think having a list of where the tree board wants to put the trees is a good idea, but what if our vision for what that park looks like, changes? So
I get keep
yeah.
it flexible.
And I think
Yeah.
another reason we did the tree around the perimeter down there at Shea is that the Young Americans at 4th of July were having a concert down there every 4th of July,
Yeah.
keeping it open as a venue for those types of things as well. But
Mr.
I agree, I would love to see, when we eventually do, down by the harbor master's office, I'd like to see a whole new pattern of trees down there.
And I think, one of the tree board's purpose, remember, was we are going to be involved in all projects now when they come before the city council. Anytime they record the tree plantings, that you guys will review that. So you have that opportunity for that input there. So,
Okay, any other comments? Susie, do you have anything? Sue?
Did everyone see the letter from Sandy Wolf in the, letter to the editor in the Harbor Light about, the Marina Park needing trees?
Yes, I did.
I actually responded to her. DDA is, the DDA, Downtown Enhancement Committee, is gonna have a meeting to talk about what would be involved in a way forward to looking at doing something with that park, because it is an eyesore right now. And, there's so many different stakeholders and people that would be involved and et cetera. So
Right.
we're gonna be talking about it, and she was really glad to hear from somebody that said it is being addressed, it just may not be addressed tomorrow.
And,
And then-
and the other thing I would add to that, Dana, is that Sandy is a good person to work with. I know her pretty well. If there's a seat open on a board that deals with trees or downtown parks or whatever, I just consider that. She has now raised her hand to volunteer.
I thought about that too, and I don't know if maybe that would be something that would happen down the road, is we would have like an advisory committee for Marina Park. That would be members from the community, the tree board, the harbor commission, DDA.
She'd be a good fit for
Yeah,
that because
I
she
think
is
so,
also
too.
a voter.
Yep,
Well, good, I'm glad people are concerned about that, because that, I think it's obviously something that needs to be addressed and enhanced, so it's good to know that. Any other comments? I see a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that.
Okay, Cece.
All right.
thank you.
Yep. Sue, where are you working from now?
Obviously not from my office at the book.